we can start with quick prep. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much for coming. I guess we can start. So obviously today's the last session, and did you manage to go through PQP? Like, did you manage to flick through the book?
Flipping through it, yeah.
Okay, nice. So I guess just a recap of what we discussed yesterday. So the first one is the difference between an animal and a human. All animals eat, sleep, be merry, right? Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But what separates us is, as you said yesterday, this idea of consciousness, this idea of the ability to understand God or connect to something spiritual. And then we had an understanding of the three layers of identity. There's the gross body, the subtle body, and the soul. Then the first chapter that we really discussed is Varnashram system. Varnashram literally means it's basically a social situation, a social system that positions us in social society based on these brahmacharis, grihastha, vanprasanyas, or in English, student life, married life, retiring life, and retired life. And this idea that all of those ashramas have their own sacrifices to make. And there's universal sacrifices we all have to make, and that is taking on spiritual teachers, taking on spiritual character and lifestyle, as well as chanting or performing mantra meditation that connects us to spirituality. And then the Varnas was Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and in modern terms that's like thinkers, leaders, profiters, and workers. Then we spoke about the frustrations of the world, how every step there's always frustration. If we get what we want, then that's amazing. But then if we want something but don't get it, if we want something and we might get it, but then that is not good enough. If we want something but don't get it, if we want something but get it, and then we might think that actually it's not what we thought it was. And the other thing is that we might want it, we might get it, but then we find out that even when we get it, it's short-lived. So then the blueprint of the Bhagavad Gita, it goes through 5 topics. The identity, we are a spirit soul living in a material world, performing activities, and to perform activities we need time. And beyond all of this is God, or Ishvara, and the system to connect to God, Ishvara, is yoga. And then we spoke about the different modes, goodness, which I won't go through, passion, and ignorance. And then we spoke about how we also need to transcend the mode of goodness, because we want to not just get to the train platform, but we want to board the train to Krishna. So this idea that the train is pure goodness, the platform is goodness. To get onto the train of pure goodness, we also need the boarding pass of devotional service. And ultimately, then that leads us to love of Godhead, which is Brahma. So today we'll cover the last 5 sections of Perfect Question, Perfect Answers. And they're all quite interlinked, so we won't go through too much of the content, and then if there's more questions or something we can take. I guess we'll try and aim to finish at about 1:30, I think. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. So the 6th chapter is about the perfect devotee. Who is the perfect devotee? So in this diagram, this one, which we brought up yesterday as well, we spoke about how animals eat, sleep, mate, defend. And the thing that separates us is this idea of learning to understand God. How do we actually go from living a life where we're just bodily conscious and focusing on eating, sleeping, mating, and defending to becoming God conscious or Krishna conscious? How do we do that? Association, okay. But what's the main crux of what we need to do? Is this the idea of developing a loving relationship with God, which means If you love somebody, then you learn how to please them, right? You learn what they like, you learn what they want, you learn to please them. And sometimes that means that you sacrifice what you think you want or what you want. When we talk about this diagram that I brought up a few times now, I think, then we see that most of our life we're actually performing activities that, let me just, if I can find the mouse. Okay, here. Most of our activities orient around satisfying the 5 horses, the 5 senses that we have. That's what most of our activities orient around. But the art of becoming more spiritual, the art of progressing in our spiritual life and becoming a spiritual person, is to go, okay, the senses, the horses want to go in their own direction, but let me rein the horses in such a way that it then pleases God. Because at the end of the day, the soul, which is us, the passenger here, we're just going for the ride in the body. But if we really want to take control of where we end up, where the chariot ends up going, then we need to control the horses, control the senses, and say no to things that aren't pleasing God, and accept those which do please God. And for that, there's a basic principle that spiritualists, not just in ISKCON, not just in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but even generally across the board, we see most spiritual paths will have some sort of austerities that we have to perform. Because actually, every living entity performs austerity in some way. The difference is that animals are forced to take austerity, whereas humans, we have the ability to take optional austerity. Like, for example, if you think of animals who are wild animals, they're forced to sleep outside in the cold. They have to perform that austerity of sleeping outside. But as humans, we have the ability to take on optional austerity, either for family we take it, like who likes to go to work 9 to 5? But people do it because it's an austerity they're taking so that they can support the family. And that's just for family. But for spiritual life, we can take the austerity to please Krishna, to please God. And there's 4 principles that are defined. So no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling, no meat eating. And I'm sure are you familiar with these? Or no, not much?
Yeah, but there's some controversy about that, right? Because they said they are, like if you call them demigods, like the drink they used to drink called soma. Soma is basically liquor, toddy. And all the Kshatriyas ate meat.
Okay.
So, I mean, in Vedic times, meat eating was allowed. So I don't know where this came from.
So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's described that when Kali started to progress, the age of Kali started to progress, then Kali was searching for a place to reside because he needed to exist somewhere. I mean, there's a backstory where Kali was basically going to be killed by Pariksha Maharaj. And then Pariksha Maharaj says, okay, I'll give you a place to stay. I'll give you a place where there's animal slaughter, where there's women being harassed or like, what's it called? Exploited. Yeah, exploited. Where people are like just dishing out money, like just basically gambling. Basically these 4 things is basically where Kali can reside. And there's a 5th place that was given, and that is in money. Because at that time in the kingdom, these 4 things didn't take place. All the animals, all of the living entities were well looked after. The women were well respected. Nobody would go to the pubs, etc., liquor, etc., unless they were really, really low caste. And nobody would gamble because they all recognized that they need to support the system of the social structure. And so when Kali was searching for a place like this, he was finding that actually there's nowhere in the kingdom, because you're such a great king, there's nowhere that I can stay. So then ultimately Pariksha Maharaj gives him the place to stay, which is in gold, in wealth. And we see, okay, we have this saying that money is the root of all evil. It's not necessarily true, but there's an element of truth in it, because when people get too greedy for money, then evil naturally comes in. When people get too greedy for anything material, it naturally creeps in.
But again, the opposite thing is the greatest philanthropers are those who made a lot of money. A lot of them made money illegally, whether it was the Rockefellers or the Carnegie Foundation or whoever.
And that's where you have to see they're philanthropists, they're not spiritualists.
Right. But I'm just saying they have done a lot of good for society, like the Carnegie Foundation, even though, or Andrew Carnegie, who made billions in the steel industry. So, but a lot of them use slave labor. So I'm just saying it. Sometimes
So is it really good then? Is it really good then?
Huh?
Is it really good then? The
Well,
fact
I mean,
what they did.
But look what the Rockefellers have done, or the Ford Foundation has done. I mean, they might have made the money in the not the Krishna consciousness technique, but they've given it down the road, like Bill Gates has done, given billions and billions to charity, to malaria vaccine. So when you look at it in the larger picture,
So
artha or making money is not whichever way you want to make money. I don't know whether you can say it's bad, you know.
So we spoke about dharma, artha, kama, moksha, right, yesterday? Right. What is that artha doing? They're using the artha in order to help others attain kama. But then what?
No, a lot of people, philanthropists, when they make the money, then they believe they get liberation, moksha.
Right, and we
because
just...
I mean, not necessarily karma, but that believe, whether Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, whether they believe in God or whatever, salvation, we call it in Christianity salvation.
Yeah. Yeah, but this is a thing, right? So you see that all they're doing is supporting the material progress of people.
No, but if you produce a malaria vaccine, millions of people in Africa and India will be saved.
And what they're going to do though with their life?
Not material.
What they're going to do with their life?
Well, I'm just saying that
if you're
saving lives, they are doing good for society. So
that's true.
It's not material.
How is it not material? What's spiritual about saving people's lives?
It is spiritual because if you save a child, that's spiritual. If who's going to die of malaria, that's spiritual.
But he's going to die eventually, isn't he?
Everybody's going to die eventually.
So
if you save a child who grows from age, let's say who have died in Africa from falciparum malaria, and now the child lives and becomes another Bill Gates, he may do another great thing for society.
I think the point of this is that karmically, those activities do accrue. The activity of gaining money through illegal means, or through giving it out in charity, philanthropy, both of those accrue karma. One accrues negative karma and one accrues positive karma. But spiritual activities, like we discussed before, they don't have karma. When you do spiritual activities, you don't come back to this material world because they don't create karma. Both these activities, they create karma, whether it's good or bad,
Correct.
which means you still have to come back in the cycle of birth and death, right? Because remember we were saying there's no loss or diminution.
Correct, that's chapter 2, right? Verse 42.
That verse I showed you. So that means that when we do spiritual activities, like activities related to progressing on our spiritual journey, then there's no karma. Then it's like you're only gaining in your spiritual bank account, there's no diminishing.
Right.
But in the material sphere, you're doing good works or you're doing bad works, it's like a material bank account.
Correct.
It's increasing,
Good karma, bad karma.
increasing, decreasing. But that means you're still going to come back next life to pay off. If you do good things, you come back in an opulent position where you've got lots of wealth, and then then that karma, you lose that karma because you're already enjoying the benefits of it. Then at the end of that life, it's finished. Or if you do negative things, then you come back to get really suffering, and then you pay off that, you lose that karma, and then after that it's like you die. So the point is, both those activities, like philanthropy in and of itself, actually will still accrue karma.
Good karma.
It will accrue good karma. So that's what I'm saying. They're getting money from illegal means, that's negative karma. Then they're doing, something positive with the money, that's good karma. But that's why it's not a spiritual activity.
Yeah.
It's a material activity that's still going to keep them bound in this material world. And then even when they give money to, like, let's say they're trying to feed, homeless children,
right.
Or they're trying to, what was the example you guys gave just now about like saving lives, right?
Yeah.
It's still you're helping the material life of others, and that's why it's still karmic. It's still related. So there's this example that if you see an abandoned child, a homeless child on the street, what's the best thing you can do for that child? You might think, oh, I'll take this child, I'll feed it, I'll take care of it, I'll clothe it, I'll give the child everything. But the better thing would be to actually reunite that child with its own parent, who it has been
But
separated
what if it's an
from.
abandoned child?
But let's say it was the king. The king who has everything and can take care of the child better than you has been separate. The child has been separated. And you think, oh, with my small salary, with my small house, I can provide for this child. The best thing is if you give that child back to the king. So that's what, with all the living entities, we are meant to reconnect others with God, you know, because God is the king, right?
Right.
God has everything. God's the best caretaker of
Right.
everyone. I cannot take care of anybody. If I see an abandoned person and think, oh, let me provide for them, what can I do? I may be able to save their life in this way, but not in that way. Like from malaria, I can save their life, and then they go and get hit by a bus. I can't protect them from that. But God is the ultimate, and so the best thing I can do is actually tell them, go back to God, you know, connect with God.
But
Find
the thing is,
yourself.
somebody who is homeless with
Yeah.
no food in his stomach, and the last thing, they want food in the stomach before they can connect to God. You know what I mean?
And that's okay.
That's the truth of life,
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
I mean,
Like we
we
spoke
are
about
blessed
yesterday,
because-
balance.
What's that?
Like we spoke about yesterday, balance. If our material situation isn't balanced, then we
Yeah.
can't connect spiritually properly,
Yeah.
right?
So
But-
if I tell the home, like I was there feeding in Tompkins Square Park, I was there with the kitchen, but if I was just wondering, I was giving them some of these Prabhupada's books. Some of these people are bedraggled,
But this
and
is-
don't have places to sleep.
They're not going to read
They're
it.
not even going to
No,
read the
but
book.
think about the
And they just
ABCDE.
wanted, they're coming for the prasad. That's
But
it.
it's
Exactly.
getting
They
them
wanted
prasad.
Exactly.
two cakes and two salads and two rice.
But in that activity of distributing prasadam,
Right.
you are reconnecting them with God.
Well, we hope so, but again,
No,
they'll
but
go
No,
back
you
and-
are. You are.
You are, because when you take prasadam, because it's offered to Krishna,
Right,
then guaranteed in the next life is auspicious
for them.
For them.
For them.
for them.
Yeah.
Whoever takes prasadam, guaranteed they are on an auspicious path. Somehow
Even
they
though
will
they're
find.
just taking to feed the stomach.
Exactly. They're on the journey back to Krishna. That's better than if you feed them meat,
But yeah.
then that's going to take them down.
No, but what about the original question, like the Kshatriyas, like.
Yeah.
So
they
Kshatriyas,
all were
you have-
meat eaters, from what I've read.
So
And
where
Shiva
does it
used
say?
to drink all those gods, they used to smoke cannabis and drink soma.
Where does it say?
It's in the.
It's not in the Shastra anywhere that Shiva drinks.
Well,
Shiva
I've
has
read
drunk-
about it. I've
Shiva
read
has
that
drunk-
There's something called soma. Was
That's for the
drink of
demigods. For the demigods,
God.
yes.
Correct. Yeah.
But Shiva's never drunk.
Right.
Shiva has drunk
But
poison.
the demigods.
Shiva has drunk poison.
Right.
So if we want
But
to
the
imitate,
demigods were much higher than us, right?
so it doesn't mean that they're devotees though.
Oh.
When you look at the Bhagavatam, you see there's many pastimes where the demigods have acted very demoniacally.
Uh-huh.
Because remember, what does being a demigod entail? It means that in the next life, we've accrued so much piety in this life that we have a chance to go into higher material forms of life, and being a demigod is a higher material form of life.
It's a material
So you
form,
have
right?
increased enjoyment. of
Yeah.
the
Or
heaven.
demigod is not closer to spiritual level than
No.
we are.
No, they have
No?
they in a more opulent lifestyle, and they have increased enjoyment. And the thing is, they have license to have increased
You might as well
enjoyment
come
because
here.
they've accrued what?
You might as well come here so mic for the mic.
So because they've accrued
No, I can hear why.
No, for the mic, for the
Oh,
recording.
Record. Oh.
for the
okay.
recording. Yeah, they've accrued
Okay, you're gonna.
so they've accrued a lot of piety, and that's why they have the allowance to enjoy
Why doesn't
more.
this Hare book they call Shiva as a demigod?
Actually,
Shiva Tattva is interesting.
They
Yeah.
keep on mentioning that
So-
Shiva is a demigod. Why? Because Shiva is considered a part of the triumvirate, right? Equivalent to Krishna and Brahma, right?
actually, Shiva is in between.
Really?
So in
Well,
this,
I was told
yeah.
initially that the Trimurti, right? Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva were all the same level. But then in these books, they constantly say in Hare Prabhupada's book that Ishvara Shiva is a demigod.
Shall we address that afterwards, because I'm conscious
I'm
that
sorry,
Yeah.
we don't want to
That's
digress
true.
too much.
But about the point about the Kshatriyas eating meat.
Correct.
So previously, yes, Kshatriyas have these strong, powerful bodies. They are always protecting. They're in war, so they have that license to eat meat. But it's not just any meat the way we have in the slaughterhouses, mass produced. They actually hunt themselves also. That was their duty, like, and never cows. So it's like they had that allowance under very strict circumstances where they themselves were going out, hunting, and then they would,
So
okay,
they would hunt
right.
the deer and they would kill the deer and eat the meat.
So
It's-
what you also have to remember is that the intention of the killing wasn't for the meat.
Mm.
The intention of the killing was to practice and to make sure that they can be strong Kshatriyas.
Right.
In warfare.
Yeah, in warfare. You can't practice that on humans because the idea is that you're protecting all the living entities. Part of the protection means that if you're killing, then you're also making sure that the living entities that get killed get as best of an opportunity in their next life as possible. So you don't just randomly kill. They actually go through a lot of prayers, a lot of yagnas, etc. before they go out to hunt as well. And then to make sure that the animals get properly, for want of a better word, utilized, that's why the eating also happens.
Mm. It's not for sense gratification the way it's happening now with meat eating. And also, it kind of doesn't apply here. It's like almost like a moot point because in this age, nobody is a Kshatriya. It says in the scripture.
Let's say the US military says our men have to be strong, right? They have to fight, and
But they are not Kshatriyas.
Generally, meat eating became prevalent in the cold climates, right? When the evolution happened, the Homo sapiens moved from Africa, right? So basically, every European climate, cold climate, started eating meat just to survive.
When you look at what a Kshatriya really is,
There's no Kshatriyas in this age.
Kshatriya will get down onto the battlefield with hands and legs, fighting elephants, fighting tigers, fighting lions. Our military don't do that.
They use weapons that destroy not only people but buildings, that destroy the future generations with their poison and
Right.
So there's actually there's in the scripture it says that everyone in Kali Yuga is a Sudra actually. We are all Sudras. So it's very difficult to be a qualified Kshatriya, much harder to be a qualified Brahmana. So in this age, it's kind of like all these things that we have in the scripture.
People who in the military,
For namesake, they're Kshatriyas.
Right? All the people who come mainly were from the Punjab, Haryana heartland, their ancestors were all Kshatriyas.
Yeah, but just because ancestry is Kshatriyas doesn't mean we're Kshatriya. If my father's a doctor, does that make me a doctor? No, right? I have to be qualified.
But I'm just saying.
You have to be qualified to be a Kshatriya.
Right.
And
Just
they're not
because your
qualified.
father is a Kshatriya doesn't make you a Kshatriya. Just because my father is a Brahmana doesn't make me a Brahmana. I have to be qualified to be a Brahmana, right?
Right.
Same way you have to be qualified to be a Kshatriya even if your ancestry was Kshatriyas.
Right.
But in this day and age, we don't really have Kshatriyas. Yes, we have fighting going on. So for namesake,
Yeah, like
the military are Kshatriyas.
to fit into the categories that would describe the Varnas, you can say, okay, there's teachers in society, Brahmins, but are they real Brahmins? No, they're not real Brahmins. There's military, there's administration happening, there's government. We can say Kshatriyas, but they're not real Kshatriyas. So it's like that, and we have the mercantile class, which is like Vaishyas, but they're not really Vaishyas because look at what they're mass producing, poison and selling it. So it's not, it's like a perverted reflection of the Varna, the four Varnas. So it's like, that's why all these things that we read about like how, okay, Kshatriyas do this, Brahmins do this, all these things, it's hard to apply because who is qualified in this age to call themselves that, We're just lucky to be Sudras. To be honest, if we're not following these four regulative principles, this is just human life. This brings us to the platform of human life. We're not following this, we're actually milechas, lower. That's what Prabhupada says,
Really?
Yeah.
And when you look at the four principles, there's a reason behind what they exist. They're not just random things just to avoid certain things.
It's in the Bhagavatam.
It's in the Bhagavatam, and they represent four things. So, no eating is about this idea of compassion, because then you're caring and thinking about other living entities as opposed to just yourself. No intoxication is about cleanliness. Keeping, it's cleanliness. Depends which around you see it. Cleanliness or austerity, but cleanliness because you're keeping the inside of your body clean. No illicit sex is about austerity. It's described that sex is the backdrop of the material world. It's the highest, most enjoyment we can have in the material world. So by abstaining from doing it outside of marriage, etc., then you're having to perform austerity, right? Because animal nature is find something that you really like, go and get engaged in it. No gambling is about truthfulness, because gambling entails cheating, lying, all these things.
You're trying to get something without working for it. That's what gambling is. So that's cheating.
Yeah.
Right. But basically, everybody now, like, let us, just for example, let's say you have funds in the ISKCON movement and they're putting it into whatever, stocks, IBM, Pepsi, whatever. Basically, in a way, the stock market is also gambling because we want our amount of money in the foundation to increase, and the best way to do that would be the stock market or real estate. So even real estate is again a form of gambling.
Yeah,
right?
it depends.
So in a way, it's very hard.
Investment is different to gambling. Gambling is you're basically trying to get your money to work very quickly and in a short period of time.
Right.
Because then you lose everything or you gain everything.
Right.
But investment is intelligently being informed about where you're putting your money. It's going to a good cause. It's going to a spiritual cause. It's going to do so many other things for society. And then also the company is reliable, etc., etc. Then you're investing your money, because investment means that you're using intelligence to put the money in a proper place. Gambling means you might think, okay, these stocks are going up, company's going to buy something great. I think it's going to be really good, so let me put my money in, and then a couple of months later I'll pull it out. A couple of days later I'll pull it out. So there's still a difference between gambling and investment, but I take the point, it does get great.
Right.
Okay, so I will skip over this one because we kind of went through it. So oftentimes when we talk about things, when we talk about this idea of austerities or anything in life, two things come up. One is, do we have destiny or do we have free will?
Good one.
Because in spiritual life, we get so many things. Sometimes people don't get things. And then we're thinking, okay, like, should I work for something in material life? Or should I just let whatever's going to happen because it's meant to happen anyway? Biggest thing that people say, if God wants me to come to God, then it'll be in my destiny and God will bring me closer.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
But what we see is that in the Bhagavad Gita and also the Bhagavatam, it's described about 5 factors of action, which are broken down into 3 constituents. So the first one is the soul. The soul really only desires and endeavors. I, as a spirit soul, I have a desire to do something. And what do? Once I desire it, I'll endeavor for it. But then what happens is that the super soul, which is in the heart, looks at the desire, looks at the endeavor and goes, okay, Anjan, you've desired this.
You got my name.
Yes.
I'm only
You've desired this, you've endeavored for it, and therefore I'm going to give it to you. You desired a 4-bed house, I'm going to give it to you. And the way the super soul then gives it is through material nature, arranges it through material nature. But what does the super soul look at when it decides that actually, Anjan, you're allowed to have that 4-bed house? The first thing is our desire, but the second thing also is our karma. Do we have the balance, the right piety to then achieve what we desire to achieve? But when you enter spiritual life, there's a third thing that the super soul looks at, and that's our spiritual bank balance. Oftentimes, and sometimes we do see people who come into spiritual life, their astrological charts say that they should have this XYZ happen to them. But then in reality, because they've entered Krishna's kingdom, they've entered spiritual life, XYZ doesn't happen. In the UK, there's a personality called Janki Das, or JD. And in his astrological charts, he was never meant to have any health issues. But he ended up having cancer. Now that's strange, because he became a devotee and his charts became negative in one sense. But what Krishna saw is that with that cancer, he would be able to preach much better. So, based on how powerful a devotee we are, how powerful of a spiritualist we are, how far in the process we are, then Krishna will decide that, okay, Anjan, you're not meant to have the 4-bed house, But I actually think you'll use it to invite devotees home, to have kirtan, to discuss the Bhagavatam with your family. I'm going to give it to you. Or he might think that, Anjan, you're meant to, in your karma, you're meant to have the 4-bed house. You're desiring it. But if you get the 4-bed house, you're going to forget me. You're going to then start inviting people to have like mini parties, like kitty parties at home. You're going to invite people to watch the football or the soccer. So then Krishna might decide that actually you're not allowed.
He's laughing.
And so when Krishna enters our life, or rather when we endeavor to enter Krishna's life, then Krishna can change our destiny.
Right.
And when we see devotees, when we see spiritual people, we see that
how much free will do we have?
we have the free will to desire and the free will to endeavor, but that's it. I have the free will to desire to give this class today. I had the free will to desire to cancel the class because nobody turned up until like 11:45.
Right.
But then what ended up happening is not in our control. I'm not even kidding. What actually happened is that just before you came, I was like, okay, I was going to message Surabhi and say, because she wasn't here yet, to say that, okay, nobody's come, so I'm just going to pack up. But then you turned up. So my desire was to, and I was going to endeavor to cancel the class. But then Krishna's sanction was like, you're not allowed to cancel class. So then he made you turn up. So yeah, we have limited free will. But the interesting thing about free will is that the more we advance in our spiritual life, the more Krishna gives us leeway in our free will. Because he sees that the way we're using our free will is to serve him, not to serve the senses.
Oh, okay.
So when we look at the perfect...
No, but what do you believe? Death is predetermined, like destiny?
Srila Prabhupada was asked this question that in the West, the death rate is so much lower than the East. Why is that?
Right.
Then Srila Prabhupada said, I don't think so. Where I'm looking, the death rate is 100%. So when we look at death, yeah, we have this notion that, okay, we want to live long, etc., etc. So when am I destined to die? Well, the reality is we're destined to die anyway. The question is, what are we doing with the time we have? Are we accruing the good and bad karma? Or are we accruing the spiritual karma? Are we messing around with credit cards? Or are we investing in our bank balance? That's our decision. That's our free will to decide. Because reality is we only have two choices. To choose Krishna or to not choose Krishna. To choose spiritual life or to choose anything that binds us into karmic cycles.
Ayurvedically, you do have a number of breaths. From the time you're born, it's determined the number of breaths that you'll have.
Right.
But like Vajra Govindam is saying, that when you enter spiritual life, you know, that karma that you had from birth, it changes. So that's how some people their lives could be extended. They were meant to leave, like Prabhupada had in his astrology, like he was meant to leave at one point, but then he survived and continued because he was preaching, you know.
He did have a heart attack himself, right?
Yeah, he had a heart attack on his ship on the way
On the
here.
ship itself.
Yeah, but he had health challenges, and there was times it said that he's meant to leave at a certain time, but if he doesn't, then, you know, he'll preach, and then the next time he'll be, you know, near death would be at another later stage. And then there's others who have actually, like he spoke about Jankinath, whose life was shortened, kind of, you know, because like spiritual life. But Krishna saw what's he going to do, and using him as an example of someone who's, you know, has a lot of resilience, that no matter what challenges he has, he's still so focused on Krishna. So, and we see examples like that in the scripture of people who go through very intense challenges, but Krishna uses them to show what great devotees they are through the intense challenges. So there's also that. We could say, why would Krishna do that to his dear devotee, you know? But actually, he's glorifying the devotee, saying, look at how great his devotion is, because look at everything he's gone through, but he still maintained his full 100% focus on Krishna.
Yeah. But there are people who are great devotees who get killed. Like, I don't know if you listen to The Hanuman Chalis on YouTube, there's a famous singer, Gulshan Nair, and apparently he died young. They killed him, they shot him, and he was, some drug gang. I don't know what it was in Pune, Bombay, or something. Yeah, but
Sometimes we have to see that. Oftentimes we say that, okay, devotees aren't affected by things like this, right?
yeah,
But the reality is that maybe he was meant to have something else, but Krishna decided that because he's a devotee, let's have him come back quickly.
quickly.
He might in his astrology, he might have basically had a long-term disease. That he'd be struggling, and then Alzheimer's kicks in. He can't even think about Krishna. He can't even chant Krishna's names.
Right.
He can't do his singing in the studios.
Right.
But instead, Krishna's like, he's remembering me now.
Take him.
Now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a possibility.
Maybe.
Obviously, it's I can't say that that's what happened.
No, we can't
it's
say
a
it,
speculation, but
right.
it's an example of what could have happened. Ultimately, Krishna knows what he decided.
But some people will take the same example and then turn it the other way and say, it doesn't matter, this person sang Hanuman Chalis, which has been viewed 1,000,000 times, and look, still he died early, right? So either way, if you are a materialist, you might say, enjoy this world and this life, because you really don't know what is out there.
Yeah, and that's why in the first session we went through authority, right?
Right.
Because in modern day we use authority based on what we're seeing around us. We're just using our senses and our logic as our authority. But we see every day that authority falls apart. We make so many mistakes each day. We thought we saw somebody, but actually it was somebody else. We thought, okay, I understand what's going on here, and then somebody explains another angle and they say, oh, my perception of the situation completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to find the right authority, and at least in my case, I see that the Vedic literature is the authority because I see that it stands the test of time.
That's true.
From a material perspective, it stands the test of time, and then it's guaranteed because it's a trusted brand. The way I explained it, that even spiritually it will showcase. And even there, you can see living examples of people who are following the spiritual aspects of the Vedic literature and see how they've transformed their life. Look at a lot of the Prabhupada disciples come from breaking all of those 4 regulated principles that I was talking about. Completely, every day. Not just once in a while, but every day they were engaged in intoxication, in gambling, in illicit sex, in meat eating.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're some of the greatest leaders that we have.
Wow.
Because the formula works. If you apply yourself to the formula or apply the formula to your life sincerely and seriously with intent, as we've been talking about somehow each day, action with intent, right?
Action with intent.
Then the transformation will happen.
Right.
But you have to be open to it and you have to give yourself to it. Just attending the classes and saying, yes, this makes sense, but then going home and then just going, okay, that was a nice class, now let me go back to Netflix, let me go back to my coffee, let me go back to everything. No, we have to learn to take some discipline in our life to go, okay, I've heard this, now let me apply it in life.
Yes.
And we see that devotees are basically endeavoring to do that. Simple living, high thinking. That's the basic principle. Because the idea is that we always want to remember Krishna and never forget him. And so the idea of reducing our material desires, reducing what we need materially, allows us to then open up more time, more energy, more consciousness to focus on Krishna, to focus on our spiritual path. You can see it already, when John etc. were here, they were discussing about how he would eat everything and anything, right? He'd go to the pubs and he'd drink, etc. But now he's seeing he's going to the pub, but he's he doesn't want to engage in that because he wants his consciousness to be clear so that then he can focus on things that actually matter to him. Because then he's opened up an avenue to now remember Krishna and think on higher purposes. So that's that chapter. Then the second one is acting in knowledge of Krishna. So one of the main things that Srila Prabhupada really talks about in this is karma. What does karma mean?
Action and reaction.
Yeah, so mostly people talk about action reaction, but often it's referred to the accumulated reactions to activities. So oftentimes we talk about karma in a perspective or in a sense of it's an activity that's going on. You know, I'm doing my karma. But then also it's talking about in terms of the piety and the impiety that we've been talking about, the good and the bad reactions. But why does karma exist? I mean, can't we all just be saints? Couldn't Krishna just make us saints? Why does karma exist? Thoughts?
I guess if we keep if we believe in rebirth, I guess, make us higher spiritual beings. The question is if you have to believe in successive births and successive, higher elevations of your spiritual consciousness. But that's a belief. We have to believe in that. But there are people who don't believe in rebirth, and like Islam and Christianity, not really, but the Jews don't believe in rebirth, and they live their lives thinking there's only one life. So for them, karma, I don't know, they believe in it, whether it exists or not. I don't know if they believe in it.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's... Most philosophies that I've been in contact with actually believe in karma. Not necessarily in the way we define karma, but they believe in an element of what you put out is what you get in return.
What they believe is in this particular life, your actions and reactions.
Yeah, and that's okay.
But they do not believe that you die young this life because your past karma is bad. They don't have that kind of philosophy.
Correct. Yeah.
Only we have that.
There's a couple of others as well, but yeah, generalizing, yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But the idea of karma, we can see, is basically like a school, right? It's basically like a process of learning. We see that a lot of the philosophies talk about, okay, if you do good, you get good in return.
Correct.
What does school teach you?
Same.
Be a good student, you get good rewards. Be a bad student, you get detention.
Right.
And when we look at the pastimes of Krishna, specifically him with the cows, then at the end of the day, when Krishna and the Gopas are coming back from Govardhan, from the mountains or from the grass patches, etc., do you know how Krishna calls the cows?
How he calls them?
How does he make them come back to
By the
village?
flute.
By the flute? Okay. So there's a process that actually takes place. So Krishna knows each and every cow by name. So
Wow.
first he calls the cows by name.
Really?
But then naturally you've got those pesky ones who don't listen, right? I mean, we all know about children who don't listen. So when you call their name, imagine your child, right? You've got 2 daughters, I think, right?
Yeah.
How old are they?
25 and 27.
Okay, might not work with them, but imagine them 10 years ago.
Right.
Upstairs in their room on the phone. You're calling them down for dinner. What do? You first call their name, right?
Right.
What's one of your daughters' name?
Nikita?
Nikita. Okay. You're calling Nikita, dinner's ready.
Right.
What happens?
No, nothing happens.
She doesn't listen. She doesn't listen.
No, they're busy in their laptop.
So she doesn't listen, right?
Right.
So then the next thing that happens is Krishna plays the flute.
Right.
Saying, going, Nikita, maybe like making some sound so that she hears you more. What happens? Still doesn't listen, right? So then Krishna blows his horn to the cows. What do?
Right.
Nikita, come down!
Right, yeah, shout.
Right? We start shouting.
Right.
But even then, sometimes they don't listen, right? So what do?
No stick, right?
For the cows, it's a stick.
Oh, it's cow, you have a stick. You can't do a stick.
But for us, we go up into the room and go,
let's go.
Slam the door open and go like, let's go.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we see Krishna uses the same method for us.
Right.
He first tries to explain, right? Through the literature, we see that he's got so many injunctions, so many teachings for us to learn. But we don't listen. So then he shows us, he gives us live examples of people or of things that are taking place and like, look, this might happen, be careful. But sometimes we still don't listen. So he then gives us an experience, shakes us in our boots. And sometimes if we still don't listen and learn, then rebirth.
Reborn.
Because we need to learn the lesson. What's the point of school? To learn the lessons, right?
Right.
And I don't know if that happens in US, but in India it used to, obviously, whereby if you didn't pass your exam, you retake the year.
Yeah.
In the UK that doesn't really happen. I don't know. Does it happen in the US?
Here everybody gets pushed forward.
The same with UK.
Here they
Same
don't
with
really fail you unless you're, I guess, so bad.
Right.
Right?
Same in South Africa.
Yeah. They don't really fail. It's like embellishment.
But see, like the Indian system is that if you didn't pass the exam, you retake the year.
Correct.
Because
Or
you need to learn. You need to learn the foundations before you get to the next year.
Whatever, 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how it is at university in
Right.
South Africa,
Yeah.
at least. In university, it's like
They
you fail,
don't
you
kick
fail.
in.
They don't push you.
They
Yeah.
don't push you.
Yeah.
But here it's unless you don't attend classes at all,
Right.
then you lose a semester maybe in college. Yeah. Right.
So that's what Krishna teaches us. He's saying that this world is a place for you to learn what you need to learn. But if you don't learn, then you're going to have to keep coming back until you learn the lessons. And we see that Shastrically there's 3 types of intelligence described. First type of intelligence is one who learns by hearing. If you take a small boy with fire, a small child with fire, maybe you've got a fireplace at home, I forgot what it's called now, or candle, whatever. Then you tell, or let's go with a fan. Fans are best examples, right? The fan, like the standing fans.
Correct.
What does a child want to do?
Put your finger in. Right.
Right? So you tell the child, no, look, don't put your finger in, it's not good for you. It's not going to be good for you. But the child still wants to put the finger in. So then you might show the child that, look, I'll put my finger in. It hurts me. So you're hoping that they recognize that fan, finger equals pain. Don't put finger in. But sometimes you get pesky children who still don't listen. So what do? What do the parents do? They turn the fan on really, really low, and then take the hand of the child and put it in just enough to prick
Right.
the finger, right?
Right.
So then the child then learns that, oh, it hurts, I don't want to do it again. And so these 3 types of intelligence are basically hearing, seeing, experiencing. And a lot of us fall into one of these categories. I mean, all of us fall into one of these categories. But how intelligent we are depends on which category we're in. If we see things, see what's happening in the Shastra, hear what's happening in the Shastra, but we still don't apply it into our life, we still think, okay, this doesn't apply to me, then Krishna will show us that actually there's other people that it's applying to who are similar to you, maybe it will apply to you. And if we still don't learn, then he'll go, okay, you now experience it so that you can learn the lesson. But if we still don't listen, if we still don't learn the lesson, then we have to keep learning the lesson until we've learnt the lesson. And that could mean rebirth. Another principle that is then talking about, that Prabhupada talks about with regards to acting in Krishna consciousness, is this idea of developing saintly qualities. Because when we talk about saintly people, when we talk about devotees, spiritualists, they carry themselves with a certain charisma, with a certain mode of operation, right? And so in the Bhagavad Gita, there's 2 types of qualities described. One is divine and the second is demoniac. Divine qualities are mainly based on selflessness. This idea of we're thinking about others, we're putting other things or other people before me. So naturally that brings itself humility. Humility because more important than me is you. Tolerance, because you might see, okay, Anjana's done something very bad, very wrong to me, but it's okay because I know he's on his journey and I'm going to appreciate and respect that what he's done is out of character, but I'll tolerate it, I'll be quiet, I'll accept as much as I can, or I'll walk away, but I won't thrash out at you because I want to be compassionate towards you. I want you to feel Krishna's love through me. So even when you're doing something wrong, I don't want to be the one to thrash out at you. I want you to experience Krishna's love through me. And the third one is patience. Because sometimes people want to change, they want to improve, they want to be better. But, I mean, this is just an example. Sometimes people want to do that. But it takes time for them to mold. It takes time for them to become who they want to be. As we were talking about change yesterday. Action with intent.
Right.
The intention is first. If the intention is there and you're putting the endeavor to make the actions come to life, it might take 1 day, it might take 1 month, it might take 1 year, it might take 10 years. It might take 10 lifetimes. Depending on how deep the conditioning is. But somebody who's trying to develop divine qualities, they're patient, not just with other people, but with themselves as well. Because they recognize that, okay, there's this thing in me that I don't want, this bad quality that I don't want, but I've lived it for so many years, it's going to take time for me to get rid of it. So they're patient with themselves as well. And then on the flip side, you've got demoniac qualities, which is all about selfishness. And what does that bring? Anger, greed, envy. Because when you're selfish, when other people are doing things that you don't like, that don't align to what you want in life, what ends up happening? We start blasting them. We start saying that all sorts of things that they may or may not be true.
Right.
We start saying things just to put them down so that we can feel good and so that our position seems like the right position and their position seems like the wrong position. And then eventually we want more and more, right? If, let's take an example of, I want that bottle of yours. I really like it and I want that bottle. If you don't give it to me, then I might get angry on you. Like, Anjan, like, I'm your teacher, you should give it to me. And then if you still don't give it, I might get greedy. I might be like, okay, by hook or by crook, I'm going to take it. And that's a showcase of my envy. That you've got something that I want. If I'm not allowed to have it, you're not allowed to have it. So I might even destroy the bottle. Because if I can't have the bottle, then I'm just going to burn everything down. So we see, I mean, these are like high level of the qualities of demoniac and divine. And in the Bhagavad Gita, many, many chapters, Krishna talks about the divine and demoniac, especially in the 16th chapter. He talks about the demoniac qualities a lot. And so we can go through, and oftentimes what I tell people, and even myself, I want to try and do this, is when we go through those qualities, just find like 1 or 2 that you think, actually, you know what, I really want to develop these.
Right.
And then focus like for a week, for a month, on just focus on trying to be conscious of that quality. And whenever you're faced with a situation where you're being tested, then if you're consciously aware that this is a quality you want to develop, then even if it's artificial, you'll be like, okay, let me practice this quality. And then over time that becomes second nature, because then that becomes part of your character, your personality. So it's a nice practical thing that we can all do. Developing divine qualities by being conscious about the quality we want to develop. But sometimes it's difficult, right? In many ways we have selfishness and we want to get to a place where we're selfless. And so the first step that we can do is to be sensitive, to think about other people. It's very difficult to go from I'm acting like this to acting like that. But what we can do in the middle is think about acting like that. Think about how other people will feel. Think about how other living entities will feel. And then that way we can be sensitive, and that sensitivity is like a stepping stone for us to then act selflessly. So then the next section is about advancing in Krishna consciousness. Now, again, from the Bhagavad Gita, you see that there's different grades, different levels that are described. In chapter 3, it talks about rungs on a ladder. Different rungs on a ladder. So first and foremost is that most people will have a karma view of life. They're basically just doing their activity, a materialistic view. I'm just doing my work, my job, and then with that job I'm just getting money. With that money I'm getting whatever I want to enjoy in life. When you start spiritual life, you start basically bringing some religious element to your life. Karmakanda, as you may have heard. This idea that I'm performing, Hindus are big on this, right? We do rituals, Diwali rituals, we do Janmashtami rituals, whatever it is. We do rituals, Ghar Pravesh Puja. When you're entering a new house, you do the puja. Why do we do it? Because when we do these pujas, when we do these rituals, then we're getting benefit out of it. If I do a Ganesh Puja when we buy a new house, then Ganesh will remove all the obstacles, so all the negativity in the house will go away, so I can do whatever I want in the house. My path is clear to enjoy in the house. But then the next step up is doing Sakam Karma Yoga, which is basically doing spiritual practices for spirituality. I still got my desires, I still want to enjoy, but I'm doing some things for Krishna.
But today I think going back to rituals, right? I mean the Hindu philosophy has become like people do rituals and there's a priest chanting. Nobody knows the meaning of this chanting, and a lot of the time we just do them because they say you have to do it and no one
Right.
knows what is the benefit.
And that's this, Karma Kanda.
Say what is the benefit?
No, that's
I mean, if you have a third person do a ritual for you, which he himself may or may not know the meaning, he might be just reciting because he learned it by heart since he was
Yeah.
age 5, right? He probably doesn't even know the meaning. You got to ask him.
Yeah, you
He
get
did
a lot
1 hour
like that.
puja, praising whoever, Vishnu, Ganesh, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Where is the benefit with the rituals?
And that's the thing, we often say, we have this saying, ritual without spiritual becomes, if you just do rituals without any spirit behind them.
Fanaticism?
Yeah, you could go with that. Sorry, it's religion without spirit becomes
Fanaticism.
rituals. Rituals are what? Just mindlessly doing things, right?
Right.
But if you want to make it spiritual, you have to add the spirit. You have to add the meaning behind everything you're
Correct.
doing.
Most of our temples don't.
But we don't.
You can go anywhere. You can go to Kashi, you can go to any of the famous temples, South, Rameshwaram.
Which is
So
why
keep
they
on doing
become,
rituals.
which is why Hinduism I often describe as being a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
Because when you look at Hinduism, it's all the Vedic literature, but whatever you want to pick from it, you pick from it. That's a hodgepodge. But when you look at spirituality, it's about intentional progress to a higher goal in life. But Hindus or Hinduism nowadays is purely about, let's just do this ritual because we've been told my Baz used to do it.
Mm.
It's running in the family tradition to do this ritual, so let's do it.
A lot of the rituals are not even from the book.
Yeah.
You know, it's not even from the book
Right.
sometimes. Like family rituals, that just happen. And then you do get the priests. I know in my family we used to get priests coming like once every 3 years to do some kind of ritual.
Right.
And it was like there was like a bona fide book that it came from. But I never connected with it. I never understood it because it was just someone
Yeah.
else reciting exactly what you're saying. And I mean, there is some level of benefit, right? Because the family has gone through the austerity, they've made the arrangements, they've got the articles, they're doing something. There's some intention of like, we want to do this for God. So
Right.
there's a small level of benefit, but it's not that they're going to get the full benefit without understanding what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like something, you get something from it, but not what you're meant to
Right.
get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But if you were to ask the priest to explain,
Yeah.
they may not be knowing the whole thing.
And sometimes it becomes like a business with
Yeah,
the
it's a
priests
business
also.
because
It's like you're paying them or you're giving them, and then it just
That's all
becomes,
it is, right?
Yeah.
that contaminates the whole endeavor when it
Exactly.
becomes about money.
That's all it becomes about money.
Mm.
Which is why when you look at Krishna consciousness or ISKCON, yes, there are rituals, but the spirit is given behind the rituals.
Mm-hmm.
When we're doing yajnas, I don't know if you came on Radhashmi and
I
Abhishek.
was
and
there
stuff.
for Janmashtami, yeah.
Yeah, Janmashtami or Radhashtami
Radha,
on
I was not
Wednesday
there.
last week.
Janmashtami was there, yeah.
Then you'll see that if you were to speak to the pujaris, if you were to speak to any of the priests, etc., they'll be able to explain like why we're doing what we're doing. What does the Abhishek mean? Why do we do the
Pancharatrika.
Pancharatrika Vidhi and stuff like what is all of this? Why do we do it? They can explain it because what Srila Prabhupada really emphasized is not blind following, which is what rituals become.
That's what happens, yeah.
But he encouraged being independently thoughtful in the sense that, okay, there's something that we're doing, do it because that's a good thing to do, but find out why we're doing it as well. He didn't want people to just accept what he was saying. He wanted people to understand what he was saying. And then test whether that makes sense or not.
Right.
Because it's a spiritual science. It's not just a faith.
Yeah, because we just for years since I was a child, I used to go around Ganesha 3 times, right?
Right.
No, I used to do it because everybody did it, and then do the namaskar, right? But then nobody said why you do it 3 times, why not 4, why not 10, right?
Right.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada actually gave us the books, and in the books you see so many reasons about why certain things are happening. You know, how many times to circumambulate Tulsi or the temple deities, you know, different things. It's like in the nectar of devotion. It's given, but the point is we have the source. Once we have it like from an authority, and like we can read it and we can say, okay, this is why we're doing it.
Right.
That's what Srila Prabhupada gave us.
Right.
And when we don't have that source, and we don't really do anything that we haven't seen in the scriptures. We don't follow anything that we haven't seen in the scriptures. We follow whatever we do is because we've seen it in the scriptures somewhere.
Yeah, right.
So that's why we want to come away from karma kanda activities.
Oh, that's what it is. That's what you're trying to show, to get away from karma kanda.
Yeah, because this is lower than practicing sakam karma yoga, which is
Sakam
doing
karma.
spiritual activities for Krishna's benefit.
Oh, okay.
We might have, well, it's not for his benefit, but for Krishna. We might still have desires, like I might still want the 4-bed apartment. That's okay. We're still going for it because we want to enjoy it in that 4-bed apartment. But then we're also doing some things for Krishna. It's this idea that I'm doing one activity for Krishna, one activity for myself. One activity for Krishna, 2 activities for myself. One activity for Krishna, 10 activities for myself. But we're doing something for Krishna and only Krishna.
Right.
But even higher than that is Nishkam Karma Yoga. Nishkam is basically about everything I'm doing is for Krishna now. I want the 4-bed house, not because I want to enjoy in the 4-bed house, but because if I have a 4-bed house, I'll have more space to invite people, to invite devotees, spiritual people, to come over, have kirtan, have a nice talk like this. And that's why I want the 4-bed house. Otherwise, I have no need for the 4-bed house. But even higher than that is bhakti yoga.
That's what.
Doing things out of love for Krishna.
Right.
Not just chanting. You may chant in sakam karma yoga, nishkam karma yoga as well.
Right.
Because that's part of the spiritual practice. But the difference between nishkam and bhakti is that in nishkam karma yoga, I want to be doing what I like doing, but do it for Krishna. In bhakti yoga, I'm doing what Krishna wants me to do for him. Classic example is in UK, the Manor devotees, so at the temple, obviously every temple will have cars, etc., right? Like this temple has many cars as well, I think. But at the Manor, we have like 3 or 4 cars from the devotees, from the residents. And so the residents, there was a specific devotee that was a mechanic, a car mechanic, and he said that I will basically repair all the cars for the temple for free of charge, and that's going to be my service.
Right.
So he always basically gave his time, like whatever time he was called, whenever it was, he would give his service to repair the cars for the temple. That's Nishkam Karma Yoga, because he's doing everything, all of his activities for Krishna and for the devotees. But then once that devotee was asked, like, okay, you're always repairing the cars, there's no car to repair right now, can you come over and help for cooking? Now he has a choice. He can say, no, that's not my service. My service is to repair cars. That's what I'm good at, that's what I'm going to do. Or he can say that, okay, the devotees need me to help cooking, I'm going to help cooking. That distinguishes whether he's a bhakti yogi or a nishkam karma yogi. If he's a nishkam karma yogi, he's going, my service is to repair cars. That's what I'm good at. I'm not going to work outside my duty. I'm just going to repair cars. I know I'm not repairing cars right now, but cooking is not my thing. I'm not going to cook. But if he's saying, actually, I don't know how to cook, but the devotees need my help in cooking, fine, I'll come into the kitchen and help. You'll have to teach me or whatever it is, but I'll help out with the cooking. That makes him a bhakti yogi because he recognizes that the devotees and Krishna need a specific service from him. Even though that's not in his nature, he's going to do it because it's what Krishna wants. So most people who come to the temple on a Sunday will fall between Karmakand and Sakam Karma Yoga. Most practitioners of spiritual life, people who you see or call as devotees, will fall between Sakam Karma Yoga and Nishkam Karma Yoga. And then you have the very elevated personalities who will say anything for Krishna, and they'll fall between Nishkam Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. So we can use this ladder to see where are we, where is most of our life oriented around. Is it Karmakand, is it Sakam Karma Yoga, is it Nishkam Karma Yoga? And then what do we have to do to get to the next step? Well, Krishna also gives that in the Bhagavad Gita. Gives a hierarchy. First thing, the best thing to do is to always fix our mind on Krishna. Because if we're always thinking of Krishna, we're always thinking about how to please Krishna. What does Krishna want? But if we can't do that, then follow the rules and regulations of devotional service. Right? We spoke about the A, B, C, D, E. I'm sure there's other seminars that you've been to that have spoken about different principles, different practices, parts of the practice. We spoke about the 4 regulative principles. Prabhupada describes them as the 4 regulative principles of freedom because they take us away from being too absorbed in our senses. If not that, then we can work for Krishna. I'm struggling to always remember Krishna. I'm struggling to give up my tea and coffee. Okay, try, endeavor for that, but dedicate your work to Krishna. Maybe if you're outside working, then you can engage your skills in some service, whatever skills you acquire at work. Like for example, I work in IT. I can use some of my IT skills to help out with the temple admin or the temple technology systems or the website. Or I could use the money that I earned from the from my job and go, okay, there's this spiritual project I really like. Let me donate to it. Maybe you don't like donating to the temple room for whatever reason. Maybe you're not so fond of giving the Lakshmi into the hundi. But maybe you're thinking, okay, Bhakti School is a nice program. They're giving nice talks. I want Bhakti School to flourish. Let me give some Lakshmi to Bhakti School. So it's not that you have to just give it anywhere you want. Anywhere. It's that you can choose where you want to give it to, but make it a spiritual charity. Something that you feel invested in. And if not that, then Krishna says, donate to a good cause. And if not that, then look at other processes. Other processes meaning like yoga processes or mindful meditation, things like that.
Which chapter is this?
12.
Yeah, 12.
4?
Chapter 12
Oh,
of Bhagavad Gita.
Why does he say good cause and other processes? They're not spiritual. These two are not spiritual. But what they do is they make the ground fertile to practice spirituality because we're becoming selfless by doing those things. Or we're thinking of things outside of just the senses. So these two make us fertile to then come to the stage of practicing 1, 2, 3. So then, last chapter is...
The last chapter? Wow.
Yeah. Okay. It's a short book. We have 2 sections left. This section and another section left.
Okay. Deciding for the future.
Deciding for the future. So we've been speaking about karma quite a bit. And we spoke about how there's 3 types of karma actually. There's karma, vikarma and akarma. Karma is good action, right? So good reactions lead to good reactions or good results. Vikarma is bad actions which lead to bad reactions. But then akarma literally means negating karma. And that's basically spiritual actions which lead to no material reactions. So when we're practicing spirituality, for the 10 minutes like I said, even if you spend 10 minutes practicing spirituality, you're not performing good karma or bad karma in those 10 minutes. So that means you've at least invested 10 minutes of your time into developing the bank balance in your spiritual life. The more time, effort, energy, consciousness we spend in our karma, in activities that are spiritual, the more we grow the bank balance and the more we reduce the investment into the credit cards or spending on the credit cards. And then this naturally leads into, well, okay, as we've been speaking about, karma across lives, right? So I know I have a different picture for this, but this just makes it easier because then you can see the color coding. So red is the gross body, green is the subtle body, and then the yellow dot is the soul. So what happens on reincarnation? Reincarnation is this idea that we basically leave this material body and take another material body on. What happens is that the gross body goes away, and you see that the subtle body and the soul go and take a new body. So that's interesting. When I die, I will lose this gross body. If I'm taking another birth in this world or in the material world, my mind, my intelligence goes with the soul. But one of the questions you raised, or one of the points you raised in the previous sessions, was that we don't remember stuff from the previous life.
Unless you're blessed.
Unless you're blessed. Blessed, cursed, whichever you want to see it as.
Yeah, that's true.
Why can't we? If the mind and the intelligence goes into the next body, why can't we remember that stuff? Because we have a limited capacity in memory as well. The brain is very complex. It's stronger than the strongest computers that we have, but it's still limited in capacity, right? So from a physical nature, it's very limited, which means it can only store a certain amount. If you think about this life itself, do you remember everything from this life? No. So there are certain things that we remember because they are valuable, important, certain things that we've forgotten because they weren't so important. Same way with previous lives. When we're young in this life, actually there is, I forget who it is, but there's somebody, a child psychologist I think, who had worked with many, many children, and he basically set out to try and understand, is reincarnation a thing? He was a non-believer actually. And what happened, he had researched many, many children. Many of these children remember stuff from their previous life, so-called previous life. And obviously there's those which are phony, those which seem real, right? And he did the research. He basically took all the details from the child and then took the child to the place, etc., and confirmed that everything is true. In many cases, there'll be children who have been born in completely opposite side of the world, like children that have been born in Africa who know about a specific house, a specific family, and even specific details about like cracks or paintings on the wall of a house in Argentina or in America something, and they have no linkage to that household. There are personalities that so-called remember being killed. They have marks on their forehead or in their body that represent the murder that they went through. And I remember one case where he had actually taken the police officers to the exact place he was buried.
Wow.
So these aren't evidence for reincarnation, but these are, or let me rephrase that, these aren't proofs for reincarnation, but they're evidence to support reincarnation. Why did I bring that up?
Talk about your memory. We can't remember.
Yeah, with memory.
It's very rare that they remember.
Yeah, it's very rare. And even in those cases, with the research, it's described that after a certain age, they stop remembering anything from their previous life. Because this life's memories have built so much.
When
The
grows
child.
older?
Yeah, I can't remember what age it is. I think it's like 5 years old or 6 years old that they stop, like, according to the research, they basically stop remembering a lot of their previous life. Like, obviously it's not a one size fits all, but around that age is when they start to stop.
Okay.
And because at that age, the consciousness in this life has started to develop so much that now this life has become so much more important. So that's reincarnation. Then liberation. What happens at liberation when we attain moksha or go back to the spiritual world? Only the soul goes. Even the mind and the intelligence stays behind. Because what use do we have in the spiritual world where we're enjoying is described that every step is a dance, every song, every word is a song, every heart is full of love, and everybody's searching for Krishna. What use do we have of the material, mundane memories? What use do we have of remembering our wife arguing with us over something very trivial? None, right?
Right.
So when we get liberated, it's described that the soul basically leaves behind the gross body, leaves behind the subtle body, and then goes and takes a spiritual body.
And where does the subtle body go?
Subtle body also stays behind. Subtle body is just subtle matter. It's still material, so it just stays behind. So then, concluding words. The last section of the book and the last segment of the course. So, there's the journey of a spiritual life. I spoke about how it's a spiritual science, right? I spoke about spiritual science. It's not just faith. Faith is a preliminary basis of science. Even in modern science, we have faith in a hypothesis. Therefore, we set out to prove the hypothesis or disprove the hypothesis. Spiritual life is exactly the same. We've got a hypothesis, which is a sambandha. Sambandha means the relationship with God, or literally means relationship, but in context, it's a relationship with God. The hypothesis of spiritual life is that we all have an eternal relationship with God, and if we reawaken that relationship, we can feel the love and we can feel happy. True happiness from within. The experiment is the abhideya, because every scientific process, you have a hypothesis, then you perform an experiment to prove or to disprove, and then at the end you have a conclusion. That's the scientific process. Hypothesis, experiment, conclude. So the experiment in spiritual life is called abhideya. It's the practice. And then the conclusion is prayojan. It's the perfection of spiritual life. So the spiritual science, the process of spiritual science is that you've got the hypothesis that we all have an eternal relationship with Krishna. And in that relationship is where we find the most happiness, the most peace. Because it's eternal. We've got a practice, like the ABCDE that we spoke about. And when you do the practice, when you put the experiment to the test, properly, sincerity with seriousness, then the conclusion or the expected outcome is that you attain the goal, the prayojan, which is that you attain the happiness that you really sought to achieve. And through PQPA, the Perfect Question, Perfect Answers, we see that Srila Prabhupada actually touches on all three of these. But the main element for anyone who's reading Perfect Question, Perfect Answers, or any spiritual book really, is about how are you applying it in life. The hypothesis is given, the perfection is given, but how do you go from the hypothesis to perfection is when you actually apply yourself to the spiritual process. And the practice involves three things. There's the process, the ABCDE, what you do. Then there's the lifestyle, how you're actually living your life. And then there's the character. Are you developing the divine qualities, the transcendental qualities? Oftentimes people think that if I just chant, if I just apply myself to the spiritual practices, then the character will come. I don't need to endeavor for the character separately. That's true.
Right.
But when you're really strong in your spiritual practices, the character will come. So in our stage, we want to endeavor for the character building as well. Because what happens is that when you develop saintly qualities, divine qualities, that supports our spiritual nourishment. And the spiritual nourishment will then increase our divine qualities. So they both go hand in hand. It's all good saying that spiritual life, we will get the character qualities anyway. But we're not so strong, we're not so pure, we're not so powerful enough in our spiritual practice that it flows into our character so much that our character becomes transcendental. So that's why we work on both in parallel. So that's why I was saying earlier, like we can go through some of those verses in the Bhagavad Gita and find, okay, let me pick out one or two qualities that I want to work on in this month. and then pick another one next month. And like that, we can develop divine qualities intentionally, which then we will feel more spiritual in our practices when we have those qualities as well. And I won't go through the verse, but this is from Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 if you wanted to go through it. But this idea that if we contemplate on material things, what ends up happening is that we become attached to material things. If I'm always thinking about having a car, then we become attached to the idea that I want this car, this specific car. And what happens is that then we become lusty after the car. By hook or by crook, I want to go after it. And then become angry, because if we don't get it, then it's like, I need it, I want it, it has to be mine. And then that might lead to delusion. We start maybe thinking that actually, I deserve this car. But actually, you may be only earning 10K a year, but the car is costing 50K. And you think, yes, I definitely deserve it. I'm definitely going to get it. And then you lose memory. Because then you forget what is right from wrong. You might start stealing. You might think that you can break into the car and take the car. And then ultimately intelligence gets lost. Because now your discretionary power is also gone. And ultimately what ends up happening is that if we contemplate on material things too much, then we fall down. Instead of rising up, we're so absorbed in the material things that we ruin our life. But what the Bhagavad Gita teaches, what Srila Prabhupada always focuses on, is on contemplating on spiritual things. Because when we contemplate on spiritual things, we become attached to the spiritual life. When we become attached to the spiritual life, our love for God will awaken. And then we become fulfilled in our life. Because we're fulfilled in our vertical relationship with God. Even if the horizontal relationships aren't giving us the happiness that we're after, the vertical relationship with God is, and therefore I'm still fulfilled. And that then brings us clarity, because then we can understand reality for what it is. We're not being optimistic about life just to avoid being pessimistic, because we're being realistic. And that reawakens our memory, our eternal memory of knowing who we are in relation to God, that we're a spirit soul, not this body. The body or our identity is made up of the gross, the subtle, and the soul. But of the three, the most important is the soul, right? Because a gross body, like I said, the death rate everywhere is 100%. The body's going to go. And the subtle body, yeah, we remember some things, but if we perfect our life, even that will go away. And then all we're left with is the soul. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's described that the constitutional position of the soul, Jivara Svarupahoy, Krishna Nityadas. The constitutional position of the soul is to always be engaged in loving service to Krishna or to God. And so when memory reawakens, our intelligence is spiritualized, because then all we're doing is thinking about how to please God, and then we rise up, because then we go back home, back to Godhead. And I'm sure you've seen similar pictures before, but this idea of rising up in love, how can we experience that? How can we see that? Well, pictures speak 1,000 words, right? The joy that we have when we're in Kirtan.
Right.
This is like a 24-hour Kirtan. Imagine the joy they feel in 24-hour Kirtan.
Wow.
Wait. Okay. Then devotees going on pilgrimage. Every morning they will set out in the dhams to go to different holy places, different temples, to see Krishna, to serve Krishna in different ways. More relevant for us, we're working outside, come home at the end of the day of a long shift at work, finding some stolen moments with Krishna.
Right.
Finding 10 minutes to read, finding 15 minutes to chant, finding 10 minutes to just sit in front of Krishna, in front of our altar at home, our sacred space, and just offering a lamp, offering some incense sticks, something. Or something that I hope that one day I may be able to develop the consciousness to do, is performing Dandavat Parikrama around a holy dham, holy place. Personalities like these will take a vow, an austere vow, of going round the holy place with whilst paying obeisances.
With what?
Paying obeisances. So you know you see people,
Bowing down.
yeah, bowing down.
Bowing.
They put a rock, they do this,
And then they put a rock there.
and
And
then
then?
they go to that place, and then they offer, or they bow down again, and then
And
they
that's
put
how they
another
go
rock.
around.
But
So
that's
that's-
why you have all those rocks.
Yeah,
there?
so that's how they know they're going all around the hill.
I didn't understand. I thought there was just the rock.
No, no. So this person is doing Dandavat Parikrama with 108 stones.
Oh, wow.
So he will stay in one place, bow down 108 times before he moves to the next space.
And then and the rocks move with them?
So so you see there's rocks up here,
Yeah.
there's rocks here, and there's
Yeah.
rocks here. In total that will be 108. So he's standing here, he'll pay one obeisance, he'll take a rock from here, place it here. And then he'll get up, bow down again. He'll pay obeisances, take one rock, put it here. Like this he'll do 108 times in the same spot before he
Then
moves to the
move
next.
to the next.
Then he'll
He'll move
move,
to the
then he'll
spot
move
for the
here,
next rock.
then his foot will be here and you pay.
It will be move that rock where the hand
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah.
And that will do all circumference. And
Go
that
over
will
that
do
hill.
3 times? How many
No.
times? does
Up
it
to
do that?
up to the vow, right?
Up to the wow. Oh, wow. Huh. Where is this? This is in Jagannath Puri?
This
No.
this one is Govardhan.
Govardhan. No.
This picture is Govardhan.
Have you been
But-
there?
I have, yes.
You have.
But I haven't done this.
Have you?
Yeah.
You have been there?
It'll take
I
about
didn't- they walked around. I did not walk around. I just walked in a few places and then took the rickshaws, you know.
Wow, okay. But you can go around the temple, right?
you
It
can.
is too big. It's huge.
take a couple of hours if you're walking.
Oh, is that right?
Govardhan is a hill, so there's many temples around this hill.
Oh, it's a hill.
And then, but it's a very sacred hill. So then you start in one place and you walk around the whole hill, and it takes like, people say like what, 8 hours?
If you're doing it slow. There's 2 rings.
Okay.
There's an inner circle and there's an outer circle. Inner circle is a couple of hours. Outer circle is like 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, something. Walking.
Walking, yeah.
This will take like 10 years.
This one, yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
But people take the vow to do it
Right.
because that's how much love they have. And that leads me very nicely to this idea of surrender,
That's
Sharanagati.
what it is, surrender.
Because surrender, oftentimes in the West especially, we have this idea of surrender. Okay, police come, put our hands up. In the temple room, we also put our hands up.
Right.
But the difference is that when the police comes and we put our hands up, we're doing it out of fear that we've done something wrong and we're being punished. In the temple room, when we're putting our hands up, we're basically saying, look, I'm yours, Krishna. I want to be yours.
Right.
Please take me.
Take me, yeah.
Pick me up. And we see that there's different types of surrender that we can have. The fear-based, like I was speaking about with the police, right? But you could apply that to God as well. You know, you've got different cultures, especially like Christianity. I don't know if in US you get these preachers, but they'll go with the mic and say, Judgment Day is coming.
Right.
Hell, you know, if you don't come to Jesus, you're going to go to hell. They're trying to build fear so that people surrender to God.
Right.
Then there's convenience. Oh, if I do the rituals, if I serve Krishna for, you know, this ritual, that ritual, then I get some material benefit out of it. It's convenience. At least they're turning to
the
Krishna.
small book I was reading when he's talking to Bob, Bob is asking him, so will I get wealthy, etc. So Vada clearly says, yes, you'll get
Yeah.
all the richness and material wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Some people do it out of duty. Okay, Krishna's given so much. You know, in Christianity, you've often got the thing where you thank God, you appreciate God for the bread on the table.
Yeah.
It's an appreciation out of duty that God has given me the bread, so I'm going to appreciate it. So I'm going to serve God in some way for the bread that He's put on the table. But the highest of all is to give yourself to Krishna out of love. Because He's beautiful, because He's done so much for us, because there's nobody like Him in the world. When you love somebody, then you want to give yourself to that somebody. You want to please them in whatever way they want to be pleased, or whatever way they're saying that they'll be pleased. But then also we see that there's an external type of surrender and an internal type of surrender. External surrender could be wearing the dhoti, tilak. External type of surrender could be coming to the temple every day. external surrender could be chanting on the beads in front of people. But the internal type of surrender is when we're putting the spirit into everything we're doing. We're putting our heart into everything we're doing. We're coming to the temple still, but we're here for Krishna. We're giving our time to Krishna. We're giving our service to Krishna. We're not here for the conversations. We're not here for the gossip, but here for Krishna. We're chanting our rounds, not so that other people see that I'm chanting a round, but I'm chanting my rounds because I want to connect to Krishna. So like this, we want to cultivate the internal type of surrender. The external is important. We don't neglect it.
Right.
But internal is where our love for Krishna really thrives. And so, bhakti or devotional service is about always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him. And in the scriptures, we won't go through this now because there's too many and it's too much.
Right.
But I'm sure over time, if you come to more programs, more courses, you'll find that there's so many personalities in the scripture that defy the normal logic of what it means to be a devotee. People think that you have to be a sannyasi to love God or to be able to like give yourself to God. But scriptures have a personality called Ambarish Maharaj, who was married, who was a king, but he dedicated his whole life to God. You have species, like people say, like you were saying earlier, like demigods are devotees, right?
Correct.
But here we've got a demon who's a devotee.
Well, even Ravana was a devotee.
He wasn't.
Huh?
He was dedicated to Brahma, but not as a
I
bhakta.
thought he was the number one devotee of Shiva.
I mean, yes, Shiva,
Right.
Brahma. Yes, but he wasn't a devotee, because a devotee means devotion.
Right.
It means that you're giving your heart to the person. But what was Ravan doing? He just wanted Shiva's benedictions. So yes, he worshipped Shiva, but his mood of worship to Shiva was for benediction. It
Right.
was not to give himself to Shiva.
Okay.
Like this, we've got different things. Sometimes people say that spiritual life is only for when you get old. But you have, in the scriptures, you've got personalities who are like Dhruv Maharaj, who are 5 years old, who are practicing spiritual life.
Oh.
So like this, there's many different things. And if there's one thing that you take away from these 3 days, it's that spiritual life and any scripture in spiritual life is based on question answers. It's based on curiosity. It's based on getting questions answered.
Right.
But what we see time and time again in the scriptures and even in perfect question, perfect answers, if you read the concluding words, you'll see that what did Bob do after hearing getting his questions answered? He applied himself to the process of spiritual life.
Okay.
Because the way to experience spiritual life, the way to know whether this spiritual practice is for me or not, is to apply yourself to the practice. And so the practice of Bhakti Yoga, the practice of Srila Prabhupada, the practice of ISKCON, the practice of ISKCON New York City, as you're already familiar with and aware of, is the practice of developing love of God through kirtan, through studying the books, through chanting, through attending the programs, through attending the programs in the temple room as well. The ABCDE.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's a request that get the questions answered, because doubts need to be cleared.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But also don't just wait for the doubts to be cleared. Apply yourself to the practice, because one magical thing you'll find is when you apply yourself to the practice, you find that your questions also get answered just by applying yourself.
Okay.
So I will end there.
Right.
It was really nice, and surprisingly we didn't go overboard so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
I'm glad you could do the class for just one person.
Oh no.
You know,
Sure.
I thought when nobody came, I thought that's why I was sitting outside.
Oh
Maybe you were going to cancel. You know.
no.